check out this red-hot back-to-work stock. Flir Systems is up 32% over the past 2 months. The company makes thermal temperature scanners, and it is seeing a big spike in demand as workers start coming back into the office. Joining us now is the CEO of Flir Systems, Jim Cannon. Jim, great to speak with you.
Thank you for having me.
We're talking about elevated skin temperature screening, so checking your temperature as you come through the door, and already your technology is on factory floors and such. I'm wondering how you see demand for a product like this after the pandemic. If you take a look at past pandemics like MERS and SARS, there's a big spike, and then it abates shortly afterwards.
You're exactly right. And the short answer is we're not certain. We've got a lot of experience with this dating back 17 years in the original SARS outbreak. Demand in the past was principally just in Asia Pacific and mostly at ports and borders. This is very different as we see demand around the world and from just about every industry as people find safer ways to return to work. Certainly, we expect continued demand until there's some sort of vaccine and such, but that's really an unknown right now.
Do you think when there is a vaccine out there, Jim, that demand for EST screening, it comes to an end?
I'm sure some demand will stop, but a lot of essential industries are learning real lessons from this. I know in our business we are, and who knows when or if there'll be another pandemic. So I do think critical industries, Department of Defense and other, must operate operations will look at ways to incorporate this as a standard safety feature going forward.
In your first quarter results, Jim, on the conference call, I believe, in early May, you noted that several large customers, were looking at some pretty large deployments. I'm wondering what the status of those possible deployments are, and if your supply chain can keep up with that. There is some concern that COVID itself is straining the supply chain, which would impact your ability to fulfill these deployments.
That has been the governor on our execution against the backlog so far. Some of our supply chain wasn't considered essential. Others, just the sheer demand we saw in the better part of the end of 5 weeks in Q1, $100 million in bookings. Now, our supply chain is quickly catching up. We've got the internal capacity as it does to meet much of this demand. But it's been a tremendous amount of work, night and day among our teams to really respond to this unprecedented demand in such a short period of time.
You noted also that demand for EST, elevated skin temperature screening technology, has offset some of the softness you've seen on the commercial side of the business. Do you see this sort of as demand for EST comes down, that means America's reopening, and do you expect that rebound to come back on the commercial side of the business and the other areas of your business that you see softness from?
Yeah, we have a really broad exposure at Flir to a wide range of verticals, from defense applications to critical industry to commercial and almost consumer applications. So some of those verticals are down 50, 60%, for example, more than offset by the EST demand. And I do expect as the markets return to work, we'll see those verticals strengthen again. And certainly, as we begin to deploy this technology and find a vaccine, we do, of course, expect the EST demand to soften and somewhat normalize.
Jim, pleasure speaking with you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Jim Cannon, the CEO of Flir. Tim, there are a lot of these sort of back-to-work plays out there that have risen very sharply. What do you make of this one?
Well, I think the software dynamic of this is fascinating. I would agree with Jim that, first of all, yes, he's been very cautious in terms of he has no idea where, well past COVID-19, how adoption and demand changes. But it's pretty clear that airports and arenas and the ease in which we can make determinations about at least some measure of a person's health can be made quickly, cheaply, efficiently. Why wouldn't this become part of, dare I say, this term, the new normal, or the workplace? How many? We've got a lot of workaholics in this country that will not stay home, and while that's admirable, it's actually certainly something that should be condemned at the same time. So I think this as a case in point for where some of these trends continue well past COVID-19, I would be very interested to follow that.
Yeah, I mean, Grasso, you're back at work, and they check your temperature, I'm sure, at least once a day.
Yep, every day to walk in the building, you got to get your temperature scanned. I'm not so worried about after COVID. What I am worried about is the government angle and the segment there. The government angle is 35% of revenue, 30% of sales. What happens in November? So I think you're hard-pressed to find another president who has pushed a lot of funding into the military. If President Trump loses, I would assume that budget is cut. And that's going to be a big dollar of value for Flir.